In a lifetime, a career of good luck twists and turns, I consider one of my great good luck twists and turns is having the opportunity to get to know someone who I've been a fan of my entire life, as a little kid news junkie, all the way through today. And it's good to reconnect with the great Bill Kurtis to talk about his book and his life. How are you?
I'm good. Well, thank you, Steve. Yeah, I followed you, through twists and turns. Where is he now? Oh, he's still working, that kind of thing. It's been fun to follow you.
Well, that's nice of you to say. We're actually doing a new stand-up tour, starting with a show in Aurora called Whatever Happened to Steve Cochran. Because after 10 or 11 firings, it is tough to keep track. So the book is called Whirlwind, My Life Reporting the News. In doing some research, I found out things about you that, Mr. Big Shot here, I thought I knew all the things about you. But let me go all the way back for a second. Good. Your dad was a Marine general.
Yes.
Disciplinarian?
Not really. He was a quiet guy. Aviators basically are different than the rest of the people, different than the rest of the Marines. They want to fly.
Sure.
I mean, that's their dream. And
sure.
He'd be gone to get some flight time in and leave me wanting to go to the Boy Scout meeting with our parents. So
sure.
I'd have to go alone. A great guy, quiet. Came out of I wouldn't say poverty-stricken, because you don't say that farmers are poverty-stricken. They
sure.
don't have any money. And so he was a good father. Good father.
And your sister, of course, if I remember correctly, had a nice career in politics as well for a while, right?
She was a state senator, 13 years. She was a president pro tem, I think, of the Senate. Now she's raising her grandchildren in Kansas.
And you had a military career of sorts as well. And thank you for your service. There's never a shortage of being able to have an opportunity to say that, but allow me to. But there was a crossroads for you, because I think all sons want to have a different path than their fathers, at least at some point in their lives, right? You want to be your own man.
Well, and he was very good, because he said, don't look at me. I don't necessarily want you to go into the Marines. Do what you want to do. And
wow.
That's the best advice you could possibly get.
Did you have any sense of how far ahead of the curve he was on that? That's a very modern take on things.
Yeah, no sense. And, the other side of the coin is maybe he didn't care.
Just don't ask me for money.
Right.
So you were initially interested in the law, correct?
Well, I went to law school for 3 years. Radio, as you would appreciate, is your part-time job, even starting in high school at 16. And then you go to college and get the little part-time jobs wherever you can, and which turned out to be really good, because, I did some classical music announcing and some top 40 announcing. Tony Curtis was my name, Curtis with a K.
I love that.
Right alongside the Professor J. Jasmo Bop of the College of Knowledge in K-Top Radio 1, home of the Sonoramic Cruiser.
And that was a time where this voice, which I'm sure you'd agree, your greatest gift, this amazing voice of yours, that was a time where you had to have a voice. Gilbert Gottfried wasn't getting on the radio when you came up.
That's right. And the top 40 jockeys, didn't particularly have that voice.
Yep.
So because it just doesn't walk into the studio. And they got a little jealous. And so they were kind of bad-mouthing me before the first ratings came out. And I was 1 to 4 in the afternoon. And suddenly they came out, and my ratings were high.
Right.
They said, what the heck is this? We're top 40. We're doing Elvis Presley, all shook up, They couldn't understand it.
Right.
But I'll tell you, I could only take it for 6 months. 6 months, and I was going to go crazy, because it was same time of day, same music, same rap that was impossible to think of. So I actually broke a contract. I was 20, I think.
Oh, you bad boy. Who knew what could be next? And our mutual friend, John Landecker in Chicago, who I'd argue is the greatest disc jockey of all time, developed an art form of being able to do what you're talking about. And that is night after night, find something new to say over 5, 10, 15-second ramps, as we call them, or lips of a record. An amazing guy, Dick Biondi, who people around the country will know. He's actually been fired more or was fired more often than I was. But Dick Biondi, he was playing. I gave Dick a hard time at one point. I said, "You've been playing circle, red rubber ball for 50 years. When is it enough?" But yeah, it takes a special part of your brain to be able to tolerate that. So I understand why you had to leave.
Oh, it does. You know, a strange thing on Facebook this morning, I saw a picture of Dick Biondi
No,
having climbed the tower on top of, someplace, as a gimmick, as shtick. And well, that's how he did it, just
sure.
do something bizarre just
Right.
in front of the folks.
So you have this fork in the road. Am I going to continue with law, or am I going to possibly pursue something else?
Yeah.
And it was kind of a mirror to the future, or a looking glass, I suppose, that this horrible, historic tornado blows through Topeka, Kansas on a night that you are filling in for a friend.
Part-time. I had done the part-time thing, as I mentioned. I had decided to be a lawyer. You go to law school for 3 years. I had accepted a job with a trial firm in Wichita. And so I had made my decision, although there was something in the back of my head that said, no, what I really want us to do is stay in broadcasting. So I went out to fill in for him. And as luck or the divine
Fate.
guidance, yeah, or something, or just getting a break, I was standing in front of the camera waiting for the general manager who was standing beside me to say, okay, it's going to dissipate. And, like all the other warnings, why this turns out to be something we all have to do, but not going to touch ground. All of a sudden, the cameraman just off the studio camera calls in. He's on the southwest side of the city saying, I've got a tornado on the ground. Suddenly, your life changes just with that.
And for perspective, you're a kid. You're 25, 26 years old, something like that.
26. Tornado, that means all the times we've given the warning that turned out to be nothing. Now, suddenly, we have to put up a shut up. So we waited for a second confirmation, which was the Huntington apartment complex being blown away. This thing was an EF5 before there was even a rating. And so I went on the air. I didn't know. It went through my head. Do I cuss? Do I scream?
Sure.
And said, for God's sake, take cover. And the message got through. We were the only TV station in town. It was Topeka, Kansas, the capital. The tornado was headed for the capital. And in between was Washburn University, where I went to law school, state hospital, shopping malls, residential districts. I mean, the whole Megillah. That's what a city is. And wiped out 8 buildings.
And that was a time where when there was an emergency, TV and radio were the absolute go-tos. So for you to have the foresight or the push by some higher power to say, for God's sakes, take cover, that's a lot different than we advise you to take shelter in your basement.
Yeah, it came from the gut. And suddenly we became the emergency communications center, asking for anybody with a chainsaw, in the surrounding communities, come help. All ambulances are needed, in Topeka. 93 counties in the state were listening to the radio simulcasting with the TV.
Wow.
Because everybody had a friend in the capital of
Sure.
the state. And they stayed with it all night. It brings tears to my eyes every time I think about it.
Well, I can't imagine it. Thankfully, can't imagine it. But from there, I've never been able to figure out if you followed history or history followed you. Because for people unaware, and that's why I highly recommend Whirlwind, My Life Reporting the News, because you do such a great job in telling the story of the news you covered, the history you covered. The track you were on was amazing. Let me jump ahead to the West Coast for a second. You go to CBS. You have this amazing run in Chicago, obviously, but you go to CBS and you're on the West Coast, and suddenly you're covering the Manson trial.
Who knew? When I was in law school, I kind of wanted to be one of the guys who covered the Supreme Court. Oh, I'll be a lawyer. I'll have the legal education and all that. Well, there were only three. And so,
Hmm.
general assignment, people wanted that. And so I gave up that dream. And suddenly, 3 months after the warning and the tornado, I was in my car with a U-Haul trailer in back headed for the Emerald City,
Sure.
Kansas, and it was Chicago. Got to Chicago, walked in the first day to WBBM TV's newsroom. John Madigan hired me, and they said, "Okay, we've got a story. Uh, Richard Speck." I didn't even know who Richard Speck was.
Right.
He had so frightened the city of Chicago. They were still paralyzed. This was September 21st. Well, it was almost a year until the trial started, not quite. And so, of course, I'm the only lawyer in that newsroom and maybe in the
Right.
city. So I covered the Speck trial. Then in the next 6 years, as a 26-year-old, starting my television career at BBM, I covered four major world-class trials of the century.
Yeah. Long before OJ.
Yeah, Conspiracy 7, Manson, Angela Davis, Speck, until I said, geez, if I do any more, I want to try it. But CBS wanted me to come back to Chicago, co-anchor with Walter, because they had some ratings. They wanted to.
Yeah, and that's a fascinating pair, you and Walter. And I want to get into that in a second, but I don't want to leave this too quickly. So your law, your interest in the law, your law degree, your chasing of the law as a career at one point works out perfectly to cover these stories. And these are terrible stories. These are very difficult stories to cover. But even before that, in '68, you've got this incredible year of violence, and you're in the middle of it as well, because we had the fires in Chicago, as every major city had when Martin Luther King was assassinated, and then Robert Kennedy a month or so later. What was that like for a kid?
Well, there were 100 cities on fire. We had 20 blocks on Madison, straight to the city limits. We had 20 blocks that are burning, and it would burn down to the ground. 20 at Roosevelt Road, 20 at 63rd. So we're not talking about a little fire. This is the Great Chicago Fire,
Yep.
too. And I followed in a car with a TV crew the fires as they were lighted in the old buildings. Somebody would come along, splash kerosene on the door, and then they would light it and begin to burn up. That's the pattern all the way down. And they stayed like that for 20 years or more.
Yeah.
Really, um, that was his kind of revenge. He was personally offended that they would try to burn down his building. But then you have, and this is interesting, King was assassinated in April.
Right.
And Bobby Kennedy at the Ambassador Hotel out in LA was June or July. Then everybody turned right around and got into the Democratic National Convention in August. I call it 4 days in August, when you literally had the police that were not trained in crowd control. It was the beginning of the militarization of all the police departments and crowd control, what they learned there. And 10,000 demonstrators, hello, coming to town,
Sure.
trying to disrupt the convention.
And this was Mayor Daley's show for folks who know the name Mayor Daley, not the one you'd know in the past generation, but the original Mayor Daley, the original boss, the big city boss. And he wanted this to be Chicago's show. So he had no tolerance for your right to protest.
Yeah. Some people will go back trying to report on, let's say, Balboa in Michigan and the
Mhm.
coverage. And they'll say, take it for granted that, it was live coverage. No, it wasn't live coverage. The satellites weren't even up yet. satellite trucks weren't invented yet. So he had kind of a slick move in which he said there was a taxi strike on. Okay, you can't park the big semi television remote cameras on the
No.
streets in front of the Hilton Hotel. So there was no live coverage. Now, they put big 2-inch videotapes that usually were used in the studio on the awnings. They moved them out where we're smart little buggers.
Sure.
And so they got the footage, as we have all seen, blue helmets wading into the demonstrators. But that footage had to go on videotape on the back of what we disguised as a police motorcycle, all the way to the International Amphitheater, about 40 blocks away. And they put it on and put it. The director said, "Look, to Walter Cronkite, we've got a dust up, down at Balboa in Michigan. We hear it's real bad, so we're just going to roll it. You add
You narrate it.
along the way." Well, in comes what looks like the world coming to an end, and this huge riot. And Cronkite is shocked and said, "We've got a something." I forget his exact words, but he lost it right then. Then
Sure.
got told. Um, it was about only 15 minutes in the intersection. There were 10,000 students. I tell this story because it was so valuable to me in learning the perspective of finding the truth and telling the truth. I was on a car on the roof right at the corner. And right down almost at my feet was the police line that stretched across Michigan. Superintendent later, Rochford, was commanding officer. And the Poor People's March, you'll recall that of the SCLC, was given permission to march. So the cops parted a little bit to let this wagon through. Well,
Okay.
demonstrators thought, "That's it. We're going to go to the amphitheater." They pushed against the police and thought they were going to get through. And that was the point at which Rutherford said, "Nope, clear the intersection." That was not the entire story. A friend of mine for Time magazine was on the second floor of the Hilton looking down on Balbo and saw 200 policemen in reinforcements come up to the demonstrators, and they were recoiling, afraid, they'll really catch it. And they pushed the crowd into the police. Now,
Wow.
yeah, which one was more important? The police wandered in. Now, we think it's the end of, Chicago uh, because of the negative publicity and everything. Nobody was killed there. And the injuries were, they take him to the hospital a little bit, but they were mostly cuts on the head. And I don't want to minimize it. It was police against the demonstrators. But in those times, it seemed like a lot. But compared to today,
Yeah.
when people have guns, it was not. The interesting thing is that from that moment, so many things happened. It was polarized, split down the middle, people for law and order or for the demonstrators. Tom Hayden and I were on a panel later on.
Tom Hayden, Chicago 7.
Yeah, and of course, and he was in the demonstrators, leading them as the smart guy, and then later charged with 7 other defendants for crossing state lines to incite a riot. He leaned over to me when we were leaving, and he said, and they were found guilty, incidentally,
Yep.
convicted of doing that when they should. And he said, "Well, we did cross the line to start a riot." Oh, why didn't you tell us that ahead of time before
Right.
we go through that world-class trial?
Right.
But everybody is always friendly after they're sentenced.
It's amazing how people can come together, but I can't get the picture out of my head of you again as a kid reporter standing on top of a car in the middle of that mayhem, or watching those fires go up after the King assassination in particular, the danger that you face in crazed times like that. I mean, just think of the basic racial aspect of it. You're the white guy in the middle of this. I mean, how are you not a target?
Well, that was the mistake that we broadcasters made, because the commuters hear of fires and they start leaving. And where do they go? Right down Madison into the
Mm-hmm.
mobs. And we did not tell everybody, hey, don't go there because you'll be pulled out of the car and beaten. Because as the broadcasters were thinking, we didn't want to communicate to the other neighborhoods, hey, we're having a riot up here. Come on, it'll be a lot of.
Right.
And I learned, don't give up your responsibility. We have it. We can save lives. And but we did. Okay. Well, we settled down and went back to beginning. So how do you get through it? Um, I believed in my profession. You got through it by doing your job, the basics. Look at the facts, communicate the facts to intelligent people who can solve the problem, and you finish basically what you should be doing. Now, obviously, in an emergency like that, you have to hold on and just try and gather as accurately as you can what was happening. But sometimes you can't see the whole picture as I have just described. And
Yeah, and it takes years after to get that perspective, I suppose, in the big picture. But as an old guy here, I desperately miss fundamental traditional journalism. It's never coming back the way I'd like it to. What you came up in, what I came up in, where you saw the story, you reported the story factually with the best knowledge you had. There wasn't a promo smacked in the middle for a TV show of your 22 minutes. The morning news, which you, of course, anchored in New York, and I would argue probably the last swath of real morning news. That's all changed now, and that's one long commercial. And, you mentioned telling people what you should tell them so the story doesn't get worse. God, if only Facebook did that. If only there was regulation in those regards. So that's troubling on 100 levels. But let me get to Cronkite here.
Okay.
Cronkite is Uncle Walter. He's America's greatest anchor, all of those things. You're not going to like this because you don't like when I'm nice to you. But I think you, Peter Jennings, and Walter Cronkite are the three greatest anchors in the history of television news.
Oh,
And I'll tell you why. Cronkite, of course, is Cronkite. Jennings was the best guy to make you think he was talking directly to you. What he did on 9/11 and his conversant style was comforting and informative and all of those things. You're the only guy I've ever seen who was able to do both, who was able to present the news in a traditional anchor fashion, but also sit down with anyone and have conversations. And of course, that led to these incredible documentaries, thousands of documentaries that you've not only voiced over, that you've done through your company, you and Donna, and being able to tell that story. So where does that skill come from? Is that just experience? Is that a gift?
well, I had been a network correspondent on the West Coast, covering not only the Chicago, probably the most disruptive time and best time for a newsman,
Sure.
in its history, and then went right to California, and they were having their riots and all the and Manson trial.
Sure.
So I had a lot of experience. When I was 33, I came back to anchor with Walter. And it takes that long. Sometimes you got to have experience and you have to have age on you.
Got to have the reps.
Yep. And so I came back and I was finally able to tell somebody what I had seen. When I was covering the Manson trial, I would go home, file my report back to New York and the Cronkite Show, and then I would call a friend who was a reporter at the LA Times and say, "How did you describe that? What about the word that I am using that says Charlie is demonic? Is that editorial, or should we kind of back off?" And so that's how in any profession. That's how you really educate yourself. Michael Jordan said he didn't learn how to become a basketball player until he hit the pros. That's what he was talking about. And he knew that if he was going to be successful with a team, he'd have to get in and help choose the players.
And it doesn't matter who's around you as well. And Michael had Phil Jackson. Who was your Phil Jackson? Who was the guy along the way who was your mentor, if that's the right word?
Well, I didn't. I wasn't close enough to Cronkite. He was my hero. There were two guys who came to Chicago to start the 73 kind of miracle newscast. One was Bob Westler, the producer for CBS News, who had done the moonshots and China production, and Eric Severide, when Eric and Cronkite went to China. I remember all that. He was the wonderkin. And then the second was Van Gordon Sauter, who was
Sure.
reporter for the Daily News and had been pulled over to the TV. And both of them came in, and they, when Walter and I came in, I don't think it was an audition, but they wanted to see how we looked. I guess alone on camera, neither one of us were very interesting, but together they said, well, maybe it's something. So unknowing it, when I left California and arrived, and Walter was the same, we said, okay, we're not going to go back there. We're ready for it. So we put the anchor desk inside the newsroom. And if you walk into a newsroom, whether it be print or television right now, the energy is in the newsroom.
Yep, 100%.
Writers are writing. At that time, the AP wire was clacking. The assignment editor was shouting across the room. The producers are getting ready, and they've got the wall with order. That's where the energy is. Well, then you take your anchors and put them in a nice sterile setting that is just about as interesting as going down the hall of the bathroom.
Sure.
But they figured that out.
You didn't know you were inventing a format, did you?
No, we knew it was new, but we didn't know how new. It would sweep the country because any success
Sure.
copied around the country. It was at its time kind of the beacon. And then what that does, it communicates to everyone. You're part of the team, and this is your mission.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, it's and every company wants that. How do you communicate? Okay, we all want to get together, and right down to the Bears. And this is what we have to do. We have to do it in unity and focus. So we had another challenge, and that was it was a greatest newspaper town. 4 dailies that were going, and when we started, and they were making the news. So we would read the paper and then go out and do their stories. And we said, well, we've got to break our own. We just have to start thinking like news people.
Sure.
And put a television twist on this. So we came up with a real stable of reporters who later went on sort of training here. And well, Lester Holt came out of the newsroom. And I tried to continue traveling as much as I could. I was in Vietnam the last 2 weeks, broke Agent Orange at that time, 1978.
For those not watching on YouTube, I'm smiling and shaking my head because, again, I hope during the writing of Whirlwind, my life reporting the news, you had a second to go, wow, I have had quite a run. Because in a life that's filled with these, I don't know how you ever stop and really appreciate all the things you've done.
You don't. You don't appreciate it until you lay them all out in a row. And
that must have been an amazing part of the process with the book.
Yeah. And when you're standing and you look back at the beginning of the tornado, there is a kind of order to it. Oh, yeah. Well, those four trials, world class, and the riot led into from the assassination and then out to California. And you got Manson for 10 months. Oh yeah, Angela Davis, and you almost, if you were a religious person, you start thinking maybe that was planned
Yeah.
some way. And that's why you mentioned at the beginning luck. And Mortimer Adler, who was the editor at the Britannica, great books of the Western world, told the story during an interview. He said, to be really successful, you have to be lucky. Really? How about all the education that you have and you want everybody else to get and the preparation? He said, no, no. It's a serendipity that you run into. I was at a cocktail party in New York, and I was 25. I just completed my PhD, and another young man came up to me and said, "How are you?" He said, "I'm, you know, Mortimer Adler." He said, "Well, my name is Robert Hutchins. I'm the new dean of the University of Chicago Law School." Later on to run the whole place. And they had a nice little conversation. They split, and Adler says, "Well, you're still not educated. What do you mean?" Well, you aren't educated until you are familiar and learn of the Western books, books of the Western world, civilization, which every student who went through college had to do. So he said, in about a year, I get this phone call. And the phone call is from Robert Hutchins. And he said, "Do you have a job yet?" And he said, "Well, not really." He said, "Why don't you come to Chicago and we'll be educated together?"
Wow.
Ooh. So
Wow.
he figured out, he said, everything I've done, didn't really play a role there.
But it's funny though, because it reinforces my thought on this too, because you make a very interesting point, as did he, obviously. But yes, luck, huge part of it. But you have to have enough skill and you have to have enough common sense to be in the right place to have that luck happen to you. People throughout the course of civilization and history have had good luck, but they weren't able to exploit it, positively exploit it. You had to be good enough to be in that position. And again, I think that's part of the story of Whirlwind, my life reporting the news that you lay out so well. We talked about Walter briefly. Walter Jacobson, for people not in Chicago, is one of the most fascinating characters, and I mean characters, in the history of covering the news. You two are very different people, always have been very different people. And on paper, the casting, if you will, of putting you two together works beautifully. But I can't imagine there wasn't a time or two where you just didn't want to pound on him. And by the way, I've told that to Walter as well.
Actually, I don't know what he said, but no, we never
Really?
got into an argument. And the reason is that I was outside all day covering stories, and he was on inside. All he wanted to do was 90 seconds of a perspective. Now, it's a little harder than one thinks, 90
And
seconds.
he's a great writer.
And he worked all day and really digging up stories. He worked for, the columnists, and then wanted to be Glenn O'Connor, and we thought that's what he was going to be. We became the greatest of friends. That is unheard of.
It really is.
Especially
as the success goes crazy.
Yeah.
Because as there's success, there's personal jealousies. There's you got this, I didn't get that. Those sort of things. It's good to hear you didn't have that.
Yeah, didn't have it. And he is more of a character, I think. I'm straight. I'm the straight guy out of Hicksville, in the Midwest. He is more interesting and can say things all of a sudden, which, like the solar system, and suddenly there's a discovery on Uranus. Well, of course, he says Uranus. And of course, everybody breaks up. Well, little things like that
Sure.
make it interesting.
Sure. No doubt about it. You lay out in the book through this course of Bill Kurtis in history and this news coverage. I mean, this ought to be forced reading for anybody that truly wants to be a journalist.
Well,
but in the meantime, you mentioned Agent Orange. You played an incredible role in getting orphaned Vietnamese children the path to come here and cut through politics to do that. He did the amazing Chernobyl work. You had groundbreaking documentaries. This is my only hack question I'm going to ask you. What achievement are you most proud of?
Agent Orange, because it was certainly an investigative report, but is almost preparing for trial. We had to prove two things. One, that this defoliant of two chemicals that had been used for 40 years by farmers without injuries, at least we think, was harmful to humans. And the chemical companies were having a great old time just selling it, saying, "Oh no, it's fine. Use it by the instructions, and nothing will happen." Well, they didn't study it. They brought in 5 lawyers to hammer me. And we were sitting there. I don't know how I came up with this, but I said, there is no study that you have done, right? That it's harmless. And absolutely, it's not harmful. And I said, well, have you done a story that proves it's not harmful? Well, it sounds almost like the same thing, but that means they had not done that study.
And that's a key. That's the linchpin. That's the key point.
That's it. So we found a guy in, Barry Commoner, who is an activist, scientist, actually working for Monsanto, one of the manufacturers of the chemical, who believed that it would get into the fatty system of humans, and then when you lost weight, it would be released, and you would have the problems. But it took 50 years for us to come from the point where the VA was denying all claims to today, where all you have to do is prove that you set one foot in Vietnam during the war, and they'll give you total compensation.
Yeah, I have a friend whose wife is battling two very different cancers, but one they believe absolutely was caused by the fact that her father was exposed to Agent Orange in Vietnam, and the healthcare she's been able to get is tied to this. These ripples of effect that this story has go on and on and on, and they'll go on long after you and I are gone.
Yeah.
After a career of all that you've done and the documentaries and everything you've done through the Kurtis Production Company, I hope you and Donna have some time to relax and kick back. But I'd be lying if I didn't say I hope you do Anchorman 3, 4, and 5.
Well, Anchorman. Well, one of the reasons I wrote the memoir was so that people wouldn't write on my tombstone,
He was the
Anchorman. Hey, I did something
Pardon me.
Before I got to the movie, which was great fun. Adam McKay, the director, and Will Ferrell. It was great fun. And Harold Ramis was living in Chicago at the time, and we called him and said, "Hey, it's their first movie. What do you think? Am I going to ruin my career?"
Yeah.
He said, "Well, I don't know. They're good people, but nobody can tell when a movie is going to be a hit."
Right. Did he also throw in Caddyshack? Worked out okay for me?
No, he didn't.
But I mean, it had to be fun. And you have been a great friend over the years. And every time you've been on the radio with me or were on the radio with me through the years, we always had a lot of laughs. And I guess I give, your family credit for this too. And certainly Donna, but you have such a balance of goodness. This to me feels like a Midwest thing too, especially for somebody that grew up, in upstate New York and have only been a Midwesterner for about 40 years. But there is a Midwestern quality that I think you exude, which is all the goodness of the Midwest. Is that trite, or do you agree with that?
No, I agree. And when it comes to race, why I don't have any problems with black or white or
Yep.
and things. And one of the reasons is that I've traced it back. When you're out on a farm in the middle and there's nothing much else to do, in Kansas it's so flat. Your success depends on the weather, whether it rains or not.
Sure.
If it rains, then you're successful. If it does not rain, you're out of business. So everybody is the same. It is an equality that you learn to appreciate your neighbors and your situation and hold no ill will to them or prejudice. I think you're right. It's a good quality.
I, I worry about the state of the world we're in for my grandkids and for everybody, because the wheels have come off so hard. People often say, we went through tougher times, the Civil War being the obvious example. Well, Lincoln's not in charge,
Yeah.
and there is no Lincoln coming anytime soon. So there is a concern in an era where I feel like we've never been more selfish, we've never been more siloed, and we've never been more the antithesis of what you just mentioned, which is it is all about me.
Yeah.
I don't know how you put the genie back in the bottle, but we really need to. Can news play a role in this? And if so, is there any way to get that done in the environment that news is delivered now?
Well, we're information gatherers and producers. We're the only institution that really has, they've tried and they're still trying to bat us away, but that hasn't been torn down completely. We're being attacked, but individual reporters going out and doing their job every day, coming in with the facts and telling the stories, that's the most valuable commodity we have. Will never really go away because in I was in Warsaw, uh, and when the Russians had come in and destroyed all the newspapers, and the reporters, being reporters, it's in your blood, went to the small publications like the Plumbers Union newsletter,
Sure.
began writing for that. And suddenly, they'll go from a 500 uh, readership
Circulation. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
to 500 or,
That
and
was social media.
yeah,
That was an invented social media.
yeah, they'll find a way to get the news out. Right. It's always many issues that are thrown in. Right now, we talk about free speech, and the reporters are most sensitive to that at 60 Minutes and ABC and NBC, and the management, kind of giving it up. Uh, we know the stories, but it's really corporate greed.
It is no question it's corporate greed and it's individuals making money
Yeah.
while selling out the future at a time when the United States Senate, in particular, because they have less faith in the House, is composed of my words, not yours, a group
Yeah.
of cowards who I have no idea how everybody could not have a mirror in their house
Yeah.
and be able to look at themselves in the mirror. It's a perfect storm of trouble. But I listen. I'm glad you're still a voice out there. I'm doing my part, and I really do think it comes down to individuals. There's a hula hoop theory, which I talk about all the time, and that is if you take a hula hoop and stand in the middle of it in your driveway and look around, fix all the things you can see first. Fix your house, fix your yard, fix your family, fix your kids, fix your schools, fix those things. Stop worrying about posting about things. Stop worrying about kicking hatred forward and start taking care of your neighbor, your local community, and all those things, and it can grow from there. Feels a little bit of like a Hallmark card, but I feel like we've lost that a little bit. Maybe that's where we reinvent it.
We have to find it somewhere. I'll use that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's no question about it. All right. Last question, I promise. And you've been so good to give me all this extra time. Everybody, please get the book, Whirlwind, My Life Reporting the News. Yes, he's much more than Anchorman. He's Bill Kurtis. But in the meantime, did you ever order a pizza in Chicago with your voice and have someone hang up on you because they didn't believe it was you?
All the time. Especially, I love going into O'Hare, and you'll be standing at the counter, and there'll be four or five of people behind the counter, and I said, "Could I have a boarding pass, please?" And all of a sudden, I'll feel the heads turn. Boom! Look, I know that voice somewhere.
Yeah, I just love the idea of just, I'd like a large pepperoni. And suddenly, no, you wouldn't. Get out, stop calling me. You're a good man, Bill Kurtis. I look forward to seeing you in person sometime soon. My best to Donna, and thank you for all the extra time. And congratulations on Whirlwind, my life reporting the news. I think it's just terrific.
Well, we have an audiobook too. Thank you, Steve.
Oh, I'm guessing they found someone to narrate that. I didn't get that call. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you for listening to Live from My Office, a service of Monkey Run Productions. All rights reserved. The podcast is hosted by Steve Cochran, and it's mixed, edited, and produced by me, Ross Cochran. Steve is available for corporate speaking gigs. He would love to MC your event, and occasionally, he's funny. Thank you for listening. Head to cochranshow.com for more.